In this episode of EHO Knows, this one's going to be an opinion piece. So it's not going to be a horror story. If you're after the horror stories, then skip this episode. But just imagine you've got a job where your boss's boss doesn't know what you do, don't even know that you exist. That when the jobs that you're really, really good at come up and they go to someone else, meanwhile, you're giving jobs that just aren't your job. And when you go to the barbecue and someone says, "Hey, what do you do?" and you tell them, "This is what I do," they just look at you blankly and have absolutely no idea. At that stage, you've got an identity crisis. People just don't know who you are, what you do. And so I would argue the environmental health industry is really in that situation. And part of the reason for doing the podcast is it's a great opportunity to be saying, "Hey, here's the stories of what we do. This is the difference we make." But there's someone who's taken this problem head on, and it's Jason Barnes, and he's written a paper all about the the branding issue that environmental health officers have and trying to talk about how to find a way out of it. How do we navigate into the future to improve the brand? So, Jason, welcome to EHO Knows.
Thanks very much, Shane. It's a real privilege to be with you.
In 30 seconds, who are you? What do you do?
I am Dr. Jason Barnes. I'm a lecturer with La Trobe University, and I teach the next generation of environmental health officers for our Australian environmental health community, our profession. And look, I've come from practicing as an EHO in local government for many years. I've made that transition to academia just recently, and got a few agendas to meet as well in doing so, and certainly building our profession into something that's sustainable and strong.
So, you really are on the coalface in terms of how do you get HSC students going, "Oh, I want to become an environmental health officer," training them, equipping them to go out into a workplace which largely doesn't even know what they do or appreciate them. So this entire branding impacts you day in, day out. So you wrote a paper, Environmental Health Practice and Identity in Crisis. Not pulling your punches there. And so, yeah, we're going to talk about that. But I'm going to be tackling it from, I'm a marketing person. I love marketing. And so branding is just all about marketing. And so we'll run through your paper and we'll just have a look at it as to, with me, with my marketing hat on, this is what I think. But let's start. What's the problem? Fundamentally, what's the problem that the entire industry's got?
Indeed. Look, I think we are an industry that has remarkable impact in our world, and without us, the world would be a very different place. But at this point in time, we have a real problem with expressing the value and the impact that we actually have. So we are quietly competent as a profession, as environmental health practitioners. We're very good at going out and preventing things from happening, solving problems without people seeing that, without people knowing what is going on or who these people are that are doing it. And certainly when we do that kind of thing, it means that our identity just is not before the world. And if that's the case, we face some real challenges ahead of us in terms of getting that recognition, getting our seat at the table, getting our place at the public health interface, and in those decisions that are made about where our future lies and what it is that we do in public health practice into the future.
So one of the problems with environmental health is if you do your job right, no one hears about it. It's when you screw up that people then say, "Well, wait a minute, who's responsible for this?" And so the challenge I see is the more successful you become, the harder it is to brand, to be out there and be known because you're successful. Whereas other people, if you've got a cure for cancer and you can be showing person after person that you're curing, then hey, look at that, you're a miracle worker. But if you're getting everyone to avoid getting cancer because you're doing your job and they're not being exposed to the chemicals, no one hears about you. And so, in one sense, you become a victim of your own success. So, here we go. So, hugely important, but when you get your job right, no one hears about it. And when you get your job wrong, everyone knows about it. Okay, so here we go. In your paper, you talk about the trouble with our inherited brands. And so you list a whole bunch of ways that you're currently seen. I've got your paper in front of me. We'll see if you've memorized your paper. But you talk about compliance and assessment and enforcement. What's the problem with if that's what you are seen as a brand?
Look, compliance assessment is something that's really been a long-standing descriptor of the work that we do or the people that we are, the role that we play. And it certainly is something that we do. It's something that's really a large and natural part of the work that we do. And I think back to my time as an environmental health practitioner on the front line, and certainly those that oversaw my work certainly reflected on that and thought of my department and my work as simply compliance assessment. They're the people that go out and do the inspections. They get the job done by checking it off and making sure legal compliance. But there's a real problem with that. And there's a lot of dangers that come with that for our brand and for our profession. And one of those is that the science and the knowledge that we have, because we are scientists. We are scientists. We use science. We translate that science into outcomes, health protection outcomes for our community. The science and the knowledge is lost. We're not using that or applying that anymore to shape our lens. Instead, what we're doing is we are simply observing and we are ticking or crossing. We have a binary view of the world of either it complies or it doesn't comply. One of the other challenges that we face with the compliance assessment brand is that we're no longer really in a place where we can stand to truly fix public health issues at their core. Again, because we've forfeited the science and we're really just relying on a legislative framework, we just apply the law if we are doing compliance assessment. So we don't really have those levers to pull to deal with the central issue that's underlying a lot of these broader public health problems anymore. It also means that some strange things start to happen, and certainly some of your listeners that are environmental health practitioners might resonate with this as well, that the value of our work as environmental health practitioners starts to be measured in very strange ways, very spurious kind of ways. So the measurement of our impact is how many inspections did you do this week, this month, this year? How many non-compliances did you find? How many enforcement actions did you take? And it's not really reflective at all on the impact that we're having or reflective of the purpose of why we're doing what we do, which is really the protection of public health.
Oh, so it's a little bit
Sorry.
like the police, where you then say, okay, the role of the police is to book so many people. And so then you're going, well, wait a minute, the role is to keep people safe. And then you suddenly started to be seen as a revenue source, or you're just seen as being punitive. And so, yes, if your role is how many inspections are you doing? How many defects? That's even worse because that one's an interesting one in terms of, oh, wait a minute, we don't want any because, yeah, otherwise you get a bad reputation. Or wait a minute, we want you to do so many because that demonstrates that you're doing your job, which then just means that, poor old Parramatta picked on by the media all the time because they've got the most restaurants on their name and shame restaurant website, but they're out there doing a really, really good job. So yes, once you start measuring something, well, wait a minute, that's not what the job is. The job is about making restaurants safe. It's not about rocking up it once every 6 months or 12 months and going, bang, look at this, I've got my tally. So yeah, so you focus on the wrong thing.
That's it. And the danger that that really opens up for our profession is that you don't need a degree anymore. The law's in front of you. You can check whether it complies or it doesn't, yes or no. Is food being held outside of the temperature danger zone? Yes or no? So it means that, again, we lose that science, we lose that knowledge, we lose that contextual input that's so important to our assessment of the protection of public health and the risk to public health. And that's a real danger. And I guess the probably the worst thing that really comes from all of this is that there's great potential if we categorize our work as compliance assessment, we also by default categorize it as red tape. And that makes us extremely disposable, particularly where governments want to move into that space of saying, look at all of the red tape we've just reduced for local business or those kinds of things. It means that we're vulnerable to being taken away. And while our job is just not involved at all in legal encumbrance, that's not the purpose of what we do. Our job's about public health. And I think it's important that we make sure that the way that we express our brand is that it is solely invested in public health and protecting it.
I made a joke about making a joke about the US before we started recording, but the irony is that in the US, we literally saw the government overnight just sack thousands, tens of thousands of public servants because they're red tape, because they're useless, because they're just slowing down the economy, businesses, they get in the way. And so the problem is, yes, once you're seen as just being red tape, it's just asking for elimination. And in one sense, that's right. But yeah, it's wait a minute, we're not red tape. We're doing something important. Yeah, okay, next. Human health risk assessment.
Brilliant. This is a key feature of our teachings for our environmental health students, and it really must be a key feature of our role, and it certainly is. Human health risk assessment is at the centre of just about all of the work that we do as environmental health practitioners, and it does reflect the point rather more of what we do. But the trouble that this particular inherited brand has for us is that it stops well short of telling the true story of all of the things that we're doing in that space. It doesn't come to that central narrative that really covers what we are doing as environmental health practitioners in our role. We don't just assess risk to human health. We also step beyond that to start thinking about interventions and ways that we manage risk to human health. So while the human health risk assessment brand is certainly a step in the right direction, and it's certainly far more progressive and more relevant than our compliance assessment inherited brand, it still stops short of that because it's only going to that assessment part of the work that we do when really there's far more to it. There's far more to achieving public health outcomes from that management of risk and designing interventions and placing them appropriately within systems to bring about those positive public health outcomes.
It's also just a little bit of an obscure, misleading sort of term. So as a title, if I was to gloss over that, I would immediately think OH&S, or I'd be thinking about, just other risk sort of things as opposed to what an environmental health officer actually does. And so it's an interesting label. Yes, it's part of it, but there's so many other people who do that in different aspects. So it's a bit of a vague one. Okay, in your paper you then go inspection and investigation, which is sort of an overlap, but yeah, you're back on focusing. If you're just talking about inspection and investigation, what are the risks?
Look, yes, absolutely. And again, inspection, investigation are really natural parts of the work that we do. They're methods that we employ every day to gather the data to inform our decision making. But lots of other professions use inspections or investigations as a mean to gather the data to inform their assessments of whatever it is that they're doing. Even the police use that kind of thing, like we mentioned before with your example. And so, with inspection and investigation, again, we're coming up against this issue where we're not really describing the unique value that our brand gives. And we're also not at all describing the outcomes of those kinds of things. So, yes, we inspect, yes, we investigate, absolutely we do, but we're not achieving an outcome through just doing that process. There's a lot more decision making, there's a lot more science and intervention design that's got to be contextual and appropriate if we're going to bring about those public health outcomes. So again, a limited way of describing what it is that we do, and really it's stepping away from identifying the coherent narrative that really spells out our unique value proposition that we offer to the world, because it's just describing methods that we use to do whatever it is that we might happen to do.
Yeah. Okay, now we're going to go on a total tangent from your paper. And so you were saying, hey, here's some of the ways that we've been misunderstood. From a branding point of view, from a marketing point of view, when people hear environmental health officer or you step in, what's the emotional response that's loaded up with that term?
Well, I guess the listeners all have their own experience of that. And if I reflect on my experience of that in practice, it really was, oh, it's the health department. They're here to do an inspection today. It's always that, oh, the health inspector's coming. It's, oh, we're going to be regulated. We're going to be critiqued. We're going to have to fight or fly. One of those kind of emotional reactions, I guess, is something that we commonly experience because too often we are being put into that compliance assessment category or that inspector or investigator category. We're here to be judged or critiqued, and it's not one of those environments where we are received, perhaps, in a way that allows us to really systematically and scientifically assess what risk actually looks like, and really truly assess what public health outcomes might be. And if we are to be in that standoff kind of sense of, oh, they're the health inspector, they're the regulator, they're the red tape people, they've come to see me today, there's not really that really natural collaborative approach to placing interventions or offering up education or redesign to motivate change in behavior or change in approaches, changes in the way that others are managing risk within their businesses or whatever it is that they're doing. So it's not really that conducive kind of engagement or relationship that we're fostering by being seen as the regulator, by starting off on the back foot. And certainly when I reflect on it in terms of internally to the organization that I worked in as well, we were always a little bit outcast as well because they are the regulatory people. They're not really the, bring community together, public health, well-being focused people. They're the regulators. So we don't really get what it is that they do. We don't really engage with them. We don't really understand the value prospect that they can offer to the other work that we're doing in public health or in whatever it is that the org is doing. So the recognition there, I guess, by the feeling, the emotive response of what the inspectorial role might be seen within the public, it certainly becomes a barrier then to being able to engage and actually demonstrate the value that our environmental health practice can offer to all sorts of domains, whether that be within our organisation on things we're trying to achieve, or it be to achieving outcomes with stakeholders within our community as well.
What about your emotional response that you get from friends?
Look, indeed. And I think we have a bit of a challenge here in this space that perhaps our brand isn't coherent enough to be able to express what it is or who we are, and to do that consistently. So the experience of environmental health practitioners and engaging with different stakeholders might be quite different because they've been interpreted as a different brand or a different thing. And I think with that lack of understanding of where the value is or the purpose even is behind those interactions and the focus of where that interaction needs to go, means that this inconsistency leads to a really lost or confused expectation. And I even think back to some of those times where I would go on site to do a food safety inspection or something like that, and people would be showing me where the fire hydrants are. And so a really misunderstanding of what are you here for, what are you trying to achieve, and what's this all about? Because there's distinct inconsistency and a really inconsistent expectation. And fair enough, because as a profession, we really haven't done a great job of expressing a coherent narrative behind what our brand actually is. What is it? What is the product, the unique value that we offer as an environmental health practice banner?
Yes. Okay. Emotional response of year 12 students to environmental health.
Look, a lot of the students that, or prospective students that I engage with, are very much attracted to the environmental health stand that we have at open days and things like that, because they think they're getting into environmental protection. That's really the appeal. They
Yes.
think they're in there to engage with wildlife and protect that, or to engage with, you know, environment protection in its rawest and most natural form. And certainly, you know, environmental health practice certainly does cover domains of environmental protection, particularly from that pollution perspective. But really, in terms of the brand, it's an assumption out there that environment must mean natural environment, of course, and really helping students to understand that our environment is our setting, it's our externalities, and that kind of thing takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of
Yes.
work to really explain the interface and the interconnections between health and setting, health and environment, health and surrounding. And while we have some public health students that join us and sign up, it's only really after their first year that they have that penny dropping moment of, oh, okay, I get it. I'm on board. Right. I understand this place. I understand a bit more about what environmental health practice actually is about, and I can sign up for that.
So the irony is that the group of people that you get the best emotional response from
Yeah.
have the response because of totally the wrong reason. And they think that you're a bunch of tree hugging environmentalists. And then you go, well, no, that's not quite what we're about. Having said that, though, of all the professions, you're probably the closest one to being able to immediately start to have an impact on the environment rather than trying to have this impossible, we're going to save the world. So it's misguided, but close enough that you can actually use it. And then you also said of those students that approach you, I would argue that the largest emotional response that you would get from students is no emotional response because they just don't know about you. Okay,
Indeed.
and last one, politicians. When politicians think about environmental health officers, what's their emotional response?
When we see politicians in this realm, of course, we've already discussed the red tape context to this, but we are very much seen as the regulators and very much the boots on the ground. And when we measure those things to demonstrate to politicians the impact or the effect of our work, quite often, again, we are doing that in ways of how many inspections did you do? How many enforcement actions did you take? So it's very much on that operational front that we see from a lot of politicians, or it's the you're a legal encumbrance, you are a challenge to me bringing about good economic prosperity within our community. You're a barrier to that, and you're someone that I need to work around or manage. So I guess that emotional response is perhaps we are a little distasteful as an image or as a brand to that political view, perhaps.
Okay, so the bastard question, where the rubber hits the road, hypothetically, there's a pandemic, and so suddenly public health is a major, major issue. Environmental health officers, did the politicians go, hey, here's a great resource to get their knowledge as to how to respond, ideas as to how to respond? Or did they go, hey, here's a bunch of labour that we can then have them walk around with tape measures going, you're not 2 metres apart?
That's it.
Politicians, COVID, environmental health officers, what did they do?
Look, COVID, I guess across Australian jurisdictions, we certainly saw a bit of a contrast in the way that environmental health practitioners were viewed. But certainly within the jurisdictions that I was working in at that time, environmental health officers were receiving a very strong message of you go and do what you always did and don't let things get in the way of that. We've got other people to deal with this emerging health crisis, and they're public health people and they're medically trained, and they will forge the way forward for us. Environmental health officers, we don't quite understand what you do, but when we get to the enforcement elements of some of the things that we implement to protect public health here, we might call on your services. So I think from my perspective, and certainly from where I experienced COVID and the response from government in particular around the way that they saw environmental health practitioners' roles in that. Again, like you said, it was very much boots on the ground, people that can go out and take those on the ground measurements or those on the ground compliance assessments of whether people were meeting those requirements or not. But in terms of using or recognizing the unique values that we can offer in terms of infection control and influencing public behavior, motivating change and control of environmental hazards, that seem to be lost. Seem to be
Yeah.
lost.
So your paper's pointing out, and the conversation here, there's a distinct disconnect between what you do and what you're perceived to do, to the point where no one can actually accurately describe what you can do. And arguably, and this is where we'll be heading soon, spoiler alert, how do you actually define what you do? So that's the academic side of things, and that's totally misaligned. And then on the emotional side of things, the people that you step in to help see you as a problem. They have a negative emotional response. They don't like to see you. They want you gone. Your work colleagues just see you as overhead. They'd be happy for you to be gone as well. Might be great to have a coffee with or whatever, but as a department, the general public are going, I don't know what you do, but oh yeah, you're the food inspectors. Guess that's good. And the politicians, they're definitely there going, don't tell me what to do. I'll tell you what to do. And so as a brand, you're stuffed. Okay, they don't know what you do and they don't like you. That's a branding issue. That almost puts you up there with Telstra in terms of people that you just don't like. As a brand, you're stuffed. Wait until next week's exciting episode to work out what the answers are. So here we go. let's let's fix the problem. So let's start with you've got materials and methods. What is it that we do then? And you've got the World Health Organization's 1990 definition. Do you know it off the top of your head, or do you want me to read it?
Yeah, look, I've got it. I've got it. So it's if you're happy.
Yep.
Environmental health comprises those aspects of human health and disease that are determined by factors in the environment. It also refers to the theory and practice of assessing and controlling factors in the environment that can potentially affect health.
What's awesome about that is, having read it, I am still none the wiser as to where the demarcation is, exactly what's to happen, and definitely no feel good. And then what I actually picked up on was the word in the middle, which is determined by factors in the environment. And the reason why I said this was written in 1990 is because we're now looking at this definition in 2026, and we have got a full-on environmentalist blinkers on. This definition in the 1990 wouldn't have even thought about environmentalism. And so as a definition, as a starting place, it's automatically misleading. But yeah, so that was your starting point, and
It
then
was
you went out.
it's an extremely broad definition in what it is. So you're right, it doesn't demarcate who or what or anything like that. But it's not implicitly wrong. It's still relevant. It's still correct to what environmental health practice involves and the broader definition, I guess, of environmental health. So there's still a role for it, but I think we need to get a bit more specific with the way that we define our coherent narrative of what it is that we do and who we are.
And in one sense, there are a couple keywords in it that are really cool because it doesn't just say assessing factors in the environment, it says assessing and controlling. And so there is that reactive or proactive aspect of what the role is rather than just, walk around with a clipboard. So it was the starting point. You then went out because you're in a university and this is what you have to do, and you reviewed all the literature out there. And well, yep, you can see it. There's a stack of different papers out there. How diverse was the response as to this is you looking at what do environmental health officers do in the literature? Yeah,
Look, the review was rapid. It wasn't the most comprehensive assessment of literature that's out there that mentions
you just
environmental health
admitted you
practice,
did
but
an
it's a great,
all-nighter.
maybe an all weeker, who knows? But at this point, what we can take from what came up in the literature is that we don't really talk about environmental health practice all that much. And when we do, there are some central themes. And it seems that our definition or the way that we describe environmental health practice over the years has developed, it's evolved. And naturally, so it should have, because our practice probably has as well. The central element to it all is that there is health protection that emerges as this central paradigm in all of the descriptions that we see. So health protection is naturally something that bubbles up to the surface. And I think that's entirely relevant because that is entirely what we do. We protect public health from those environmental factors. When we look a bit deeper into that, though, and certainly this is one of the challenges that we see with the World Health Organization's definition from the 90s as well, is that there seems to be this inference that we directly engage with factors in the environment. We, as environmental health practitioners, are getting our hands dirty and we're going out and dealing with whatever these human health hazards are in the environment directly, that we are managing them. So there seems to be this kind of element that bubbles up and it does re-emerge from time to time through the literature over the years as well. Something that does come up occasionally and it sort of recurs through the years of the literature that we see is that practice, environmental health practice, ought to be more health promoting as well. So certainly while we have our health protection paradigm that is central to almost all of those descriptions, there does seem to be a campaign, I guess, that keeps finding its way to the surface of maybe we need to rethink the way that we do environmental health practice to not just protect health, but improve it or promote it or enhance it or shape it in a way that it changes people's lifestyle behaviors and those kinds of things as well, so that they experience higher degrees of health or experience better well-being, I guess. However, that emerges and then it disappears, and then it emerges and it disappears again. As the literature progresses and as it evolves into the more modern era, and certainly what we see post noughties, tens, and 20s in that more contemporary literature and descriptions of environmental health practice is the emergence of risk assessment and risk management within the work that we do, in the way that we describe it. However, with the descriptions over time, probably the thing that is completely consistent through that literature is inconsistency in the way we describe what environmental health practice is.
If you stepped into the US, and even that's a big generalization because state by state, if you stepped into the US, if you stepped into the Europe, and then once again, country by country, state by state, stepped into Africa, stepped into Australia, would the definition and the concept and the expectations vary radically?
Potentially there will be some variation there. Certainly the literature does seem to be rather Western biased, and that is a pretty common thing that we see with all literature, is that it is largely Western biased. But certainly there seems to be resonance with any geographical jurisdiction of health protection being a central paradigm, dealing with factors in the environment being central to those descriptions as well, and there being this new conceptualization of risk assessment and risk management. And certainly for us to be able to do environmental health practice in any of those geographical settings, in those community settings, there needs to be that linearity, I guess, or that alignment of the way that we do it. And certainly there is. And if we think about what it is that we're doing, if we're controlling those factors in our environment, while the unique identification of some of those factors that might impact us differently in those different locations or in those different socioeconomic settings or those kinds of things, those socio-ecological aspects that really do shape what the context is that we're dealing with. Really, the way that we're dealing with those kinds of things by using science and systematically assessing the way that risk is managed from those environmental hazards is something that is central. It is something that is universal. There's a universality to that that would be entirely relevant to environmental health practice in any dimension or any jurisdiction, whether that be geographical or otherwise.
And so, content, let's go down to emotion. Is there a difference in emotional response as you go around the world? Yeah, are some of them aiming for fear? Are others aiming for, I don't know, warm fuzzies? Any thoughts there?
Look, when we reflect on this, and this really is a central argument that comes back in showing the worth of environmental health practice, showing the value. It really is in those jurisdictions that place environmental health practitioners within their front line of their health protection systems. We certainly see a fairly universal way that we engage and the way that environmental health practice is expected to function. When we see some of those jurisdictions internationally where environmental health practitioners do not form part of that front line of public health services or public health systems, those health protection systems, we start to see the emergence of types of disease, of types of inequity, in types of public health impacts that are being had. So when we look at it through that lens, we actually start to see where we might be able to understand and show the value of environmental health practice. Because as we were talking about before, the challenge that we have is we're trying to show the impact of nothing happening. We're trying to
Yes.
show something that is a non-eventuality. And really, the way that we reflect on that is if you take environmental health practitioners or environmental health practice out of the equation, all of a sudden the impact of environmental health practice is distinctly apparent. Is distinctly apparent. But when we try to focus on that or measure that within our really microcosm of within our country's jurisdiction or even within our local jurisdiction with our state or even municipality or those kinds of things, that distinction's not clear. That distinction's not there. That contrast is not there because we don't see those two extremes. So really, when we look at it from that global perspective, I think that is really where we can start to understand better the value and start to understand some of those levers we can start to pull and demonstrate with what it is the unique value prospect, the unique value proposition of environmental health practice really truly is.
How cohesive are we internationally in terms of, are we all trying to head in the same direction, or is there a pull? Some groups are trying to go in one direction, some groups are going in another direction as to, what are the fundamentals, or what's the messaging going to be?
There's certainly some Western traditions that underpin a lot of the way that we conceptualize environmental health practice within Western and developed nations. And certainly there are reflections there of our forefathers that were the health surveyor or even the surveyor of nuisance. Those kinds of things really have shaped the way that we conceptualize it in Western nations. In other areas of the globe, that isn't quite the case. And certainly we see environmental health practice being broken up into domains or disciplines or those kinds of things. And often they are being handed off to professions that aren't necessarily environmental health practitioners at all. We see things like food safety being portioned off into a food safety focused area given to food scientists or those kinds of things. We see other elements of practice around housing standards, standards of habitation, and those kinds of things going to others within a really focused and almost compliance centric, compliance check kind of role as well, something that's unique. And certainly we see that with a lot of the Asian contexts of environmental health practice as well. So that is really a reflection and potentially a danger that environmental health practice isn't conceptualized as managing those factors within the environment that can harm human health. And so they're compartmentalized into other domains where it's natural or easy for a government to shape that as a health protection system, but it's fragmented and consequently it's not cohesive within itself. So internationally, we start to see these different iterations of what environmental health protection systems actually look like. And that's a real challenge that we need to overcome as well in identifying what our narrative is, what it is we do, so that we can be there to bring together a bit more of a cohesive shaping of what those health protection systems actually look like with environmental health practitioners right dead center.
So, from a marketing point of view, the pinnacle of marketing, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, you can go anywhere in the world and you're going to see the Coke symbol, or you're going to see the golden arches, and you know what you've got. And the marketing is consistent all around the world. Yes, they might localize it a little bit, but you're pretty much getting the same concept, the same feeling, the same standardization. Here, this would be the equivalent of saying to McDonald's in every single country, hey, you go and do your own marketing, you decide what you want to do. Not happy with the golden arches? You can make them something else. And in fact, we'll leave it up to store by store basis as to what you're going to do. And so yes, we can talk to every single environmental health officer and get a slightly different idea. But as you've pinpointed, you step into a certain country and you go, well, no, that's not your job. That's the food scientist. Oh, no, that's not your job. That's whatever else. And so, yeah, so as a branding exercise, you've got that challenge in terms of even if you got it right, you're still then competing against mixed messages coming in from other countries or whatever. Okay, so I highlighted down at the bottom problem, no clear identity. People, organization, countries going in different directions. And so, section 4.2, forging a coherent narrative.
Indeed. So when we reflect on what the literature tells us and we reflect on what is happening as environmental health practitioners every day, if we bring them together and we think about what it is that we do, the thing that we seem to miss, as I mentioned before, is that while the hazards that are sitting in the center of our focus are environmental and they're usually insentient. And the data that we capture, we go out, we take measurements, and we make assessments of things that are both environmental and social. There's elements in that social domain that we're measuring, assessing, determining as well. When we start placing interventions, they're almost always within that social domain. We're telling people to do things, or we're asking people to change their behavior, or we are trying to shape things in a way that we stop people doing something that is leading to a loss of control of an environmental hazard. So we inform, we educate, we compel, we punish duty holders. We deal with people. And often it is the bit that gets lost in what it is that we're trying to describe of environmental health practice is that we're not going out and dealing with those environmental factors directly ourselves. We are assessing the way that others manage the risk to public health from those environmental factors. And then we start to place our interventions usually within that social domain, that inform, educate, compel, punish. So when we think about that, if we were to reflect on what that is and try and shape up a bit of a narrative, we use empirical and social science to then inform our assessment of risk and the adequacy of risk management so that we can then devise those suitable interventions and affect that better protection of public health. And so when we think about that, we use scientific methods of inquiry and to our reasoning. And we use regulatory powers to inspect and investigate, like we mentioned before, inform, educate, compel, enforce. And then we place our interventions in that social domain. So if I can proffer perhaps a description, a narrative for environmental health practice, it would be that we scientifically and systematically assess the adequacy of how duty holders manage risk to public health from environmental hazards. And as appropriate, we will apply interventions to motivate or improve their management, the management of the risk so that we can better protect public health.
I'm thinking about that one. Oh, do I go with my alternative? This is the EHO knows. definition. And do I pull my punches? Environmental health stops your shit from becoming other people's shit, and largely that's it's all about how do you have people live together such that they're not negatively impacting each other. And I'd like to extend that to saying, and not destroying their environment in the process. But yeah, I don't think that one will pass muster as pump. I can't see it becoming the logo of, EHA or whatever.
It's
But
it's very much the point though, because the problem is spanning from behaviours of people.
yes,
So we intervene to manage those behaviours.
and but what I also then the challenge, so this is me putting my marketing hat on, I hate your definition because your definition is straight away, what were the opening three words? We scientifically and
Scientifically and systematically
yeah. And
assess.
what you just did was put me to sleep.
Yes.
And so this I think is one of the challenges with the industry is that you've got two challenges. One is you want to be seen as professional, competent here, and yet at the same time you want to be then making sure that you're emotionally engaging at the same time. And so that's the challenge is you led with scientifically and then going, that is so true, but it then just doesn't resonate with the public. It doesn't resonate with mums and dads, doesn't resonate with cafe owners. And I think that's a huge branding issue. But then at the same time, you don't want to compromise and be seen as, hey, we're the happy, feel good people, because that then undermines you with politicians and undermines you with, the CEO of whichever council and whatever. So I see that as a fascinating branding challenge.
Indeed, I agree. And look, that really is a very clinical definition, I guess, of the narrative behind what it is that we do as environmental health practice. And I think there is a place there for reforging that emotional response to the name environmental health practitioner or environmental health officer or whatever it is through those interactions and the way that we start to express our brand, the way that we shape our brand through those interactions with those that stand to actually value from the work that it is that we do. If we can help them understand and start to shape their own personal description or emotional response or association, I guess, with a particular outcome, something that's benefiting them, something that they are valuing from, we'll be in a better place to have a brand then that sparks a different emotional response other than heading off into dreams of better things, daydreams of nicer things.
Because you actually asked the question, do we need to change our name to fit with our newfound narrative? And, once upon a time, you were called food inspectors. And, so the name does change. Environmental health officer, totally misleading because it sounds like you're a bunch of tree hugging greenies. And so, yeah, that's a problem. But could anyone actually now come up with a good name for you and would it actually be able to take off? Or is the industry so big now that you could never ever change the name?
Look, I think if we are at a point where we can shape those experiences, those interactions, and really do a good job of selling what it is, the value proposition of our work, because it is impactful, it is valuable, it protects community health, public health. If we can do that, then it really shouldn't matter what it is that we're called, because all of a sudden we've helped our community build their literacy of what it is that we do or what it is that we're offering them. And all of a sudden, environmental health practitioner is a natural term that they're familiar with, one that they associate with particular benefits or values that they receive from the work we do. I don't know if this is the time nor my place to be able to proffer whether we change our name to something different. It's probably not necessary if we do a good enough job of building the actual value proposition and demonstrating that to our stakeholders, those that really do need to understand what it is we do and to identify the impact that we have so that their associations sort of start to shape that brand instead.
Which is now I want to dive into the, how can we actually do all these things? But interestingly, that's where your paper finished. But I will go back one step, and you've got this beautiful table, and it's no good me holding it up because no one will see, but I should get my video editor to actually drop it in, download the paper. But you've got this table and it says domain of environmental health practice, and you've got food safety, water quality, wastewater management, blah, 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 blah. And it goes on for 2 pages. Means of inquiry, duty holder, focus of assessment, environmental health hazards, interventions applied. And I look at this table and I go, okay, domain of environmental health, food safety, water quality, blah, 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 duty holder, food businesses, food business operator, whatever. And straight away, I go from a marketing point of view, that's the market. So what you've got is this table and it lists 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, a dozen, more than a dozen different domains. And because of that, you've got about 50 or more duty holders, which means that you've got 50 markets, which means that from a awareness point of view, you've got 50 different markets that you need to increase your brand awareness to demonstrate value. That's a challenge. Just
Yes.
putting it out there if you fail to realize. But to me, that when I looked at this table, when that really highlights from a marketing point of view the big challenge you've got, because you can put your effort into one and be neglecting the other. But this is 50 different groups, 50 different emotional reactions, 50 different false assumptions that can be worked upon. Yeah,
That's entirely right. I think if I can flip that around for a silver lining, I guess we're at this place though where we have 50 engaged markets. We're already doing work with these people. We're already engaging with these people within our day-to-day practice. So we already have the opportunity to have the voice with these markets as well. So it's our opportunity now to start sharing with them and helping them hear and understand the value that they stand to take from the work that we do. And I'm not trying to undermine the true scale of the effort that this is going to take to make shift in those markets, to actually build anything like brand equity in those markets. But it's a starting point, and it's not starting on the outside, it's starting on the inside.
the next observation I had was you had means of inquiry, inspection, investigation, sampling, blah, 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 interventions applied, education, advice, blah, blah, blah. From a marketing point of view, I'd say, well, this is the product. This is what you deliver. And then, but what you just said then was, well, wait a minute, here's 50 areas that we're already working in. What you don't have in this table is all the problems. Here's all the problems that these stakeholders have for which we then provide the solution. And part of the reason is because, yeah, then you'd suddenly have a list that's not a dozen, it's not 50, it's not even 500. Like that list is 1,000, 10,000. Like, what are all the problems that you fix, that you avoid, that you can provide solutions on? And then from a marketing point of view, that's what we do. We don't focus on the product. You focus on the problem. And so you're going, look, got this problem? We can help. Bad marketing create the problem. So you're not cool, drink some other product that will, but yeah, you don't have that list of problems. And so from a branding point of view, look at all these things, look at all the different ways we help. Latent uh, uh, product placement. Oh, there's a podcast called EHO Knows that talks about, here's the problems and whatever. But my suggestion is tell the stories. Don't solve the problem and shut up about it. be sharing the stories. But here's the marketing tip. Too often, the type of posts I see in Facebook are, here's our wonderful, you know, EHOs. And you go, don't don't focus on you. Just go, oh, here's a blah 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 blah. Unfortunately, people don't like to be, mentioned with the bad crap, but blah blah blah. Have this problem. This is the solution. Oh, look at that. Um, and so then you're starting to be seen as the solution provider rather than just going, hey, we exist. Um, so, so yeah, you didn't have the list of problems in your table, probably because you wanted to keep it to 24 pages, 13 pages technically.
It
So
it does have to
how
be
do
publishable,
environmental
absolutely.
yeah, so how do environmental health officers go at being visible as the solution provider?
Uh, as I was suggesting before, because we are already engaging in these spaces and we are already placing those interventions come as a result of the problems that arise. And they also give us a platform in which we can be expressing the unique value that it is that we are using. And as well as that, we can talk about some of the methods of the way that we got there, our coherent narrative of what environmental health practice is. So when I think about that, and I think about the days when I would go out and I'd do a food safety inspection and I'd write up the report for the food business. And quite often we would use a template, and a lot of your listeners probably align with this as well. And the template would say, on date, whatever, Jason undertook a food safety inspection at your premises to assess compliance with the Food Act, whatever year. The following items are detailed for your attention. In doing so, we are not at all going to any extent to highlight the methods we've used that are reflective of our unique approach or our unique values and the way that we achieve that that outcome, that result. And also, we're not talking about or showing, demonstrating the way that the problems that we're trying to solve, the problem we're trying to help with. There's no mention there of risk. There's no mention there of applying our scientific knowledge to assess control of those environmental health hazards. And there's no way of us saying that we're compelling that food business now to address these items in the interest of protecting public health, in the interest of improving their management of risk within their food business, within their realm of being able to maintain their reputation, their reliability, their own branding. So this is our opportunity to start rethinking the way that we express ourselves in all of the interactions that we have with those that stand to value from the work that we do. So it's in those inspection reports that we start to express better what it is we've done and how that is a benefit. What is the value here for those receiving that report, those receiving a letter from us? When we write our strategic plans or our budget bids, our environmental health practice or environmental health programs, we need to be sure that we are expressing these kinds of things in there so that those that stand to value from it understand that we are the only people that can be doing that for them, and what a great value it is to them that we're providing to them through the way that we do it, through the way that environmental health practice is delivered. So that's the thing for us to start to shift, is the way that we express ourselves and taking the advantage of every one of those interactions, whatever it be, whether it be viewed in the light of, oh, it's a bit compliance, it's a bit enforcement-y, or it be a brighter outlook in terms of his strategic objectives or his strategic directions, or here's a program that we want to get up in our environmental health unit for the betterment of public health. Underpinning that, underlining that of where the value is, where the unique value of environmental health practice is an important thing for us to start doing. And all of a sudden, we start to build and build and build what it is that is our brand, the way that we're expressing it. We start to get it into those various markets that we need to get into. But it's important that we have consistency in the way we're doing that too.
You also touched on one of the key principles for marketing is WIIFM, the world's most popular radio station, and it stands for What's in it for me. So every message that we give, if the audience doesn't care about it, if it's not about them, they tune out. And pretty much, if you get a report, what's in it for me tends to be, we want you to fix this or we'll hit you with a stick. And that's okay, why would I want to read this? But then you touched on, the role of the environmental health officer is to keep the public safe. Now, at that stage, that doesn't tick the what's in it for me box at all. Who cares about the others? I'm a struggling business. I'm trying to put food on the table for my family. But the byproduct of me doing this is I will protect your reputation. I will make sure that your customers are giving you 5-star reviews rather than a 1-star review because you put half of them in hospital. And so, yeah, how we put that message across, you can talk about, these are the methods, this is what we do, but underlying all of that is why you do it, and then trying to have that really resonate with, the recipient. And unfortunately, when the food inspector steps in and you're there with dread because of the problems, or wait a minute, here's the environmental health officer. Excellent. So good to see you. Have a look at this. I'd love your feedback on this. I am struggling with this. What can I do here? And then that's the difference in branding in terms of, oh, fantastic. This is helping me. I want you. I need you. And it would be awesome if the politician said, oh, I want you. I need you. Please. What are your thoughts here? Okay, so I'll finish with this question. What do you think should be the emotional response that the public should have, or businesses, whatever, when they hear you're an environmental health officer? What's the emotion?
Really, something we need to aim for is thank goodness you're here. Really, wouldn't
Yeah,
that be a wonderful thing to hear when you step into a food business or you step into a situation of investigating a noise complaint or an environmental pollution issue or whatever have you? Thank goodness you're here. Someone that can scientifically, systematically assess the risk to human health and to find a way out of this, a way forward that protects public health and gets a good outcome for everyone. Wouldn't that be a lovely thing?
I think that's an awesome place to finish. So, um, thank you very much, Jason, for well, one, writing the paper, for trying to tackle the problem, and for being here on EHO Knows.
Thanks very much, Shane. It's been a real pleasure.